Okay, we are recording. Yep.
So, today's session is a test. We've been working on trying to develop Jessica, Edwin, and I have been working on trying to develop some training material, trying to make things make sense. And then I've been working on it a little bit more, and we want to test it out on you before we start taking it out and testing it out with people who want to become facilitators of empathy circles. So last week we focused on, the topic was the speaker, and let's see, Edwin, Nancy, and Louis and I were all there, and so it was a really good, I think we all agree it was a pretty good session. And today it's about the listener. And before we get on to doing the normal practice rounds that we do, there's kind of two questions I want to ask. And one is that handout that we sent you on the listener role, tips, and experiences. We see this handout as being something that can help facilitators and also help maybe new people who are coming into empathy circles who want to know more about it. But we're looking for feedback on it. And I don't want to spend a whole lot of today on it. I mean, I want to spend a few minutes on the feedback, and then you can also send it to us by email, more specific comments. But just kind of in general, what'd you like, what didn't you like, and just want to have a short discussion on that.
And since I didn't see it, forgive me, because I've been on holidays, travel around the country, and I'm finally getting reintegrated now. Is it better that I read it on the chat and lose our videos, or is it so short that you can speak about each one and I can hear it for the first time and give feedback?
No, I think you'd have to. It's not that short.
Okay.
And I don't know if I'm gonna. As I say, today, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, and so it's just kind of big picture. Does it work? Does it not work? And then I would like more, if you have more specific feedback. We know it needs editing, like it needs that type of thing to clean through it. But is it helpful?
Okay.
I'll start. I put the link in the chat window to it.
Okay, I'll look. But related to that, is today 60 minutes, 90, or 120? I'm available for all of it, but
120.
120.
Yeah, I had written down that I think it's a good framework, a good start. It's really helpful to start breaking down this aspect of the listener, to have different sort of headings and start to get sort of nuanced about the different aspects of it. So I find just having that framework, just really, really helpful. There's all kinds of little tweaks and stuff, but that's just something we can keep iterating on. So I find it immensely helpful.
Okay. But in the chat room, I now see two things. Which one is the one?
It's the second one.
Okay.
And that was kind of the purpose too, was just to get something down, put it out there, and we'll always be tweaking it as we get feedback. So other feedback?
Okay, I'd like to mention something. First of all, I think it's well written, and it's a very good point of reference, and I think that it's a kind of text that it makes you to respect it, so that it has something to say, which I really liked very much. I would like to ask you if this is a text that Ingrid, Edwin, and Jessica worked on, the three of you, or is Ingrid's yours text?
No.
The three of you?
The core foundation, most of it was, I would say it was Jessica, Edwin, and I. Okay. And then I've added a few little things to it.
All
Because I
right.
kind of cleaned it up some, but it was really Edwin, Jessica, and I.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Then thank you for this beautiful text. And I'd like to mention the tone of voice. As a listener, I mean that you, what about the tone of voice? What about eye contact? And what about body posture? Because when I read it, I said, okay, hold on a second. Is it for online sessions or for on-site sessions? Because it's hard for me to imagine Ingrid stay like this in your room with your people there, just having a kind of cold face. I don't think that you do this. I haven't met you personally yet, but I don't think that this is your attitude. So I thought maybe these are some of the things that they might have taken for granted, because sometimes we don't mention things that we think that, oh, come on, can it ever happen otherwise? So I think that it would be very important to mention things about how we indirectly treat the other person, that our tone of voice can communicate a lot of things, even if we say one word, or even the body posture, or even if we touch the hand of the person. This depends, of course, on some cultural differences. For example, in my country, as I have mentioned many times in the past, if you don't do something like this, you are considered to be cold. I mean, we touch each other more. In other countries, that's not so. That's not the case. So I and also, do I have eye contact? For example, when we have these sessions all together, if I don't look at this camera thing, I give the impression that I'm looking, I'm disoriented. But most of the people, 99%, when they have online sessions, they never look at the camera, they look at the picture. So this makes you feel that something is missing. However, when we are in the same room, that's not a problem. But many people find it hard to keep eye contact, which I think is very important in a session of in a circle of empathy. So these were my comments.
Okay, so that's kind of adding tone of voice, eye contact, body posture.
Right.
It's indirectly the way we treat indirectly the things that we're communicating. So we can do that.
Yeah,
Thank
because
you.
imagine if you're saying something like this and you are talking about something that is so horrible for us. Oh, and what if I'm like this? I'm just staying focused on you, you see? So I'm just communicating a few things. Yeah.
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So are there any other feedback?
I wanted to say I really like the cleanup that you did, Ingrid. I think it's the sentences are short. It's very clear and direct, and I like that style. It's easy to read, and I really love the first two tips of what are some tips related to reflecting back and not just listening. Like, it's really the reflecting back, and that the first two tips are really like what to say.
Yeah.
An example of like repeating, rephrasing. So you really broke down what reflecting back is and how it looks like. And I really like that, because reflecting back, some people don't know what it is. And knowing what to say could be a really a reassuring thing for a completely newcomer.
Okay, so that really helped provide more to the reader to know what reflecting back actually is.
Yes, I
okay.
Really, and giving some examples, I think is was really great. Yeah.
So that's if you have any more feedback on it, please just email them. Either you can email it to Edwin or me or whatever, and as I say, we'll just keep refining this as we go through the process with other people.
Okay.
And then I want to ask a question to everyone before we get into the practice. And So why do you think it's important for a facilitator of empathy circles to know more about listening? Why do you think, I know we haven't gone through this yet, and so it may be better to ask this question later, but why do you think it's important for a facilitator to have more information about what the listener role is, tips to be a better listener, and reflecting back, and also the experience they may have?
Well, I assume, I guess I hope the obvious, and that is that in addition to the listener needing to learn how to listen, the facilitator has the role of noticing if somebody actually is effectively listening and giving feedback, and if not, being able to participate in a non-judgmental way about how maybe it could be improved.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems like there's a coaching role there, so that the facilitator needs to be able to notice if the speaker is not being heard and if the listener is not really doing an effective job, and be able to kind of coach and help the listener.
Okay. Any other, does anyone else have any ideas of why this, how this could be helpful for a facilitator?
Because I think that the problem nowadays is that we don't wait for the other person to express their views, and we're very good at speaking and talking about this and that, but when it comes to just being patient, we just can't control our feelings. And if as a facilitator I can't do this, I don't know how to do this as a person, then how am I going to show this as a way for the participants to follow this path? So, and after all, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So this means that we should know that listening matters more. And I find, even if we have someone who knows how to speak, how to communicate, and the listener doesn't know how to listen, then the whole procedure just is over. Cannot continue. So I think listening comes first, because we know how to speak. Most of us know how to speak, but we don't know how to listen. We can't wait.
So it's kind of modeling the behavior for the participants.
Right.
The facilitator needs to be able to do that. Okay, does anyone else have any other comments? Go ahead.
So okay, it was just that I think it's grounding for the facilitator, the kind of deeper awareness you have, and you kind of get more grounded, and then can hold that empathic presence, have sort of a sense of confidence or groundedness when you're facilitating.
Have you noticed that yourself?
I have. I've noticed that doing a lot of empathy circles is grounding, and I think that kind of going in deeper into the nature of the listening, I think will help ground too, because I have a lot of stuff in here, around listening, and I'm really kind of wanting to go into, become more nuanced and more aware of what it is that I'm doing as a listener. So I think that will help. I don't know. I have to find out. I just think it will.
Yeah. Okay.
I also would like to add, I think it's also simply great for the facilitator as a tool to give to the participants, so that it's a way to be on in the same page about what we mean by listening.
So it's providing the participants with more information on what exactly it is we're talking about. So they have a better idea of what to do.
They have a better idea, yeah. And I think it also gives an implicit permission, unless I do, like, for example, explicitly say, I might, interject to help you, guide you during an empathy circle as a facilitator. I like to explicitly say that, but by handing something that says, here's what we mean by reflecting back and listening in an empathy circle, I'm also saying, if it doesn't go that way, we are here to learn, and I might, help you to do that. And so we all understand why sometimes I say, no, this is not how you do it. And someone can be less offended and say, oh, well, I'm a good listener. Why are you, telling me I'm not a good listener? I think it helps to what's the word I'm looking for? I guess be on the same page on what we mean.
Yeah. So that's all of that's really good feedback, because what I think we'll do with that, we didn't have any of that content written. And when we do when we do some more of this training, I think we'll actually talk a little bit about, have a session where we do talk a little bit about, why is it important to learn more about the listener, something to the facilitator. Why is this of value to me? So
I have another thought on that, is that by getting more nuanced and articulate in this, it'll create a way of creating some introductory training material, like a little intro video that can kind of help take some of the sort of a pre-training. So I see it as sort of a tool for helping develop a training video,
I see.
for example.
Okay, so I'm ready to go ahead and go into the practice rounds. Are you guys, does anyone else want to say anything before we start? Okay, so what we would like is to try to keep the practice rounds. There were, on that handout, there were some questions on there, but try to keep it the topic about the listener. But I'm aware if there's something really that you really want to talk about that's not about the listener, that's okay too. But we would like to kind of focus it a little bit more on the listener. And in that handout, if you go to the, I think the last page, and you're thinking, oh, what can I talk about? You can just look at that and maybe answer one of those questions or something. So, Edwin, do you think 5 minutes?
Mm-hmm. Should I keep time?
Sure. And who would like to go first?
Sorry, Ingrid, I'm not sure I followed. What is there a topic for? We're going to do an empathy circle. It's my first time, so I'm not sure what's happening.
Yep. Now we're going into, we're calling them kind of practice rounds, empathy practice rounds, a circle, where someone speaks and someone listens.
Okay.
The regular thing that we do, that we spend most of our time in, and the topic is the listener.
Oh, okay.
So it's to talk about what have your experiences have been related to being a listener. What challenges have you faced being the listener? What maybe have you done that's helped you get better being a listener within the empathy circle and also outside?
Got it.
What have you learned about yourself from, here's, for example, I would say for myself, the listening, it's something it's significantly improved my relationships with my husband and my children and my grandchildren and my friends. It's taking the listening skills from Empathy Circle and applying them in my personal life. So that's an example.
Does that mean, are you going first, therefore?
I guess so. I haven't asked anyone to talk. I really wasn't going to. I just wanted to give an example of
I can go first if you want, Ingrid.
Okay, yeah,
and
go ahead.
I can just talk to you, and then maybe it'll help Jessica kind of understand what the process looks like. And
okay.
I don't know. Okay. So what I would like to talk about is the challenges that I have had relative to being a listener and providing empathy. And there are two that sort of stand out for me. The first is preparing myself for the conversation. And sometimes rather than being proactive, I'm more reactive going into a conversation. And I'll come back to this in a minute. And then the second is just the emotions I have associated with the other person related to whatever it is that we're talking about. So two major challenges for me are being proactive versus reactive in a conversation and managing my emotions in that conversation.
So you have clearly identified two challenges that you've experienced with empathy circles, or as the listener. Won't necessarily say you said empathy circles. And the first challenge is that you really want to be more proactive rather than reactive. And the second challenge is trying to manage your emotions, which, depending on who you're talking to, can be, they can vary.
Exactly. And so what I would do is go a little bit more into the proactive versus reactive scenario. And I find that when I'm in the empathy circle, my head is in a certain place. I know that my job is to be a listener and provide empathy. And so I set everything aside and just focus on that. And while during those conversations, I might have thoughts that come in like, oh yeah, I had that experience, I can set those aside because my job in the empathy circle is to just be the listener when that's my role. So I'll stop there for a minute.
So you've noticed that when you're in the empathy circle and when you're being the listener, that you it seems to be a little bit easier for you to do that because you know your job is to listen, and you can do that in the empathy circle. And even when you notice these other thoughts or something coming in, you can recognize them and you can kind of set them to the side.
Exactly. And opposed to going into a conversation with, say, my daughter, who has a lot of things going on right now, I get triggered so easily, and unless I'm really careful, I find myself reacting as the listener and not providing the empathic statements or the reflective listening that she would benefit from so much more than my advice or my own experiences.
So you've noticed that when you're not in an empathy circle and you're in like a regular conversation in everyday life, but specifically the examples with your daughter, that it's much more difficult to just listen fully, to be totally there, and to be able to put those thoughts aside. That instead you find yourself getting triggered, and then instead of maybe giving the reflecting back something that would benefit her more, you find yourself sometime giving advice or problem solving, and
right.
you wish you could go into that empathic space more.
Yeah, and I think right alongside that is the emotions. And so more so in an empathy circle, it's easier to manage the emotions, recognize, set them aside, acknowledge, set them aside. Whereas when you're in that one-on-one and you're also in more of a reactive mode, it's much easier for the emotions to sort of block your ability to provide the reflections or rephrasing or the different tools that we use as empathic listeners.
So you've noticed, or what you think is happening there, is that when you're in that situation where there's some more emotions, that the emotions can kind of block it or make it much more difficult to go into that empathic place. It's like they kind of take over. Is that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I think in my mind, those are the two major challenges that I face with empathic listening, is just basically proactive versus reactive. You know, are you prepared for that conversation? And if you're prepared for it, then you already kind of have a feel for what your emotions might be about it, and you can proactively manage that. Whereas if you go into it with less preparation or no preparation, it's more difficult to manage the emotions and provide the empathic listening that the listener or the speaker would like much more.
So that with the challenge, that first challenge you mentioned about the preparing or proactive versus reactive, that preparing, you have found that being able to prepare for going into that space really helps you a lot, be able to be more empathic. Whereas when you don't have a chance to prepare, it's a lot easier to go into that reactive mode.
Exactly. I feel heard.
Okay. Let's see, I'll talk to Demetra. Mimi. I still say it. Demet, say it for me. Your first name.
It just stress on D. It's just Dimitra.
Demetra.
I know.
Okay.
No, Dimitra. Just as you see it written, just stress D. Dimitra. That's all.
Strike the what? The T?
Stress D. The third syllable from the end.
Oh,
D.
okay. Okay.
That's all. So that's why I said, call me Mimi, so as to okay.
So when I love listening to what Nancy was saying, definitely resonated with her. And it was funny, when she first started talking, I found myself, when she said two things, I found myself starting to write down. And then I totally lost my listening when I went to write. And then it was like, oh gosh, what did she say? And it was like, it took mental activity to come back. And I wasn't, anyway, it took me a little bit to come back to hear what she said. So I'll stop there.
Okay. So what I hear is that even though you really related to what Nancy shared a few minutes ago, you just lost track of your thought when you tried to keep some notes the moment Nancy said, okay, I'm going to mention two things. And you got so emotional that you couldn't really follow her, even though you really wanted to do so.
I think I got distracted from listening to her by trying to take the notes. And what that incident reminded me of was a time I was in an NVC training, and the leader she did this demonstration of giving empathy. It was the first time I ever saw it really demonstrated, someone giving empathy, and it was just like my jaw dropped, and it was like, I want that. And I asked her, I said, afterwards, I said, how do you do it? How did you do that? And she said, I am with them 100%, and I don't think about anything. And she said, the words just come out. And I was like, really? The words just come out? And she said, yes. And I've tried that, and it does, it takes a lot. I'm not there yet, but it works.
Okay. So this experience you had with Nancy reminded you of something that happened in your life some years ago when you had the first demonstration of how empathy works, and this lady talked about probably was empathic listening or empathy in general.
She demonstrated listening and reflecting back.
Okay, so she demonstrated the whole procedure, and you found it absolutely fascinating, and you asked her how could she do this, because you really wanted to reproduce the whole procedure. And even though you feel that you haven't reached this point yet, you feel satisfied, and you feel that you're gonna reach this point sooner or later. So you asked her, how did she do this? And she said that she was fully immersed into the words of the speaker, and she said that the moment you do this, the moment you lose yourself in what the other person is sharing with you, then the words you need to say will just come out of you without giving them a second thought. And you were very, very surprised and excited with the explanation the demonstrator provided to you.
Yes, that's exactly right. It was kind of shocking, that, and I liked how you said you lose yourself in it when you're with the speaker. In a way, you said something like that when you reflected back to me. And when Nancy was talking about a little bit earlier, Edwin was talking about how being in the empathic presence can be grounding for him. You know, when that's why a facilitator, it's helpful to be in that place when you're a facilitator, learn more about listening, because you can enter into like this presence, which is grounding. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to explain this very well. And then when I thought about Nancy talking about reactive and, being proactive and reactive, that in some way it's that grounding, that the being in the empathic presence helps ground me so I can be proactive and not be not taken away with whatever the other person is sharing with me. I know that's a lot, so I'll let you.
I'll give my best. So
just focus on the end.
Okay, I'll do so. So it seems that you could very successfully connect what Nancy said to what Edwin said before, and these two made sense to you because, and also to what the demonstrator mentioned. And so you feel that the moment you just stay absolutely focused on the speaker, then you can just know how to do things. You know what the next step is, and you don't need anything else. You just you are absolutely there. You don't feel the need to react, because you are there with the speaker 100%.
Yes. And I'll be just about done. And I've noticed this, for example, with my husband, if we're talking about a contentious topic, and if it's something I've done that he's upset about or something, he can be talking to me about it. And if I can go in that empathic place, that listening, when I can just really listen to him, I don't get defensive. And whereas the old before that, I think I would get defensive, but I can listen to him say something that might be hurtful, but I can be with him and hear it in a much softer, gentler way, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it makes sense. I understand. What I hear is that you see that the whole procedure of empathic listening has benefited your relationship with your husband, and now you see that you react in an absolutely different way compared to how you react in the past. So when he complains or he talks to you about things that might be hurtful, and I mean, you would prefer not to hear, or you would prefer not to be any reason for him to share these comments. You feel that now you have the ability, the option to practice empathic listening, and instead of becoming defensive and start reacting to his words, you can just calm down and stay focused on what he's trying to say. And you feel that this is something that you weren't able to do in the past, and this has brought about a big change in your communication with him.
Yes, I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Thank you too. All right, now okay, I'm gonna talk to Luis. Gosh, there are so many things I have to say. Okay, so first thing, sometimes I think that when I try to talk to people about empathic listening, it is as if I'm trying to teach coding to people who don't know how to read and write. So this is very, very shocking, and I think that sometimes it feels so disappointing because they just can't do it.
So if I hear correctly, it's when you start to try to teach people about empathetic listening, it's as if you use code sharing in a way that is so specifically about the skills that they sometimes don't, you feel they don't hear what you're trying to do. They feel a little overwhelmed by it. Is that close or not?
It is close. What I'm trying to say is that they will like to hear, they will like to understand. But if you don't know how to read and write, imagine people who just had never been taught these skills. How can you understand coding?
Oh,
I mean,
see. Okay, so it's because they have, if I understand better now, it is because if they don't have the experience, they wonder, how can you learn this? It's as if it's another language, as if it's coding, and they're a little lost.
Yes. And I try to do this with my students, just to explain and, of course, show them the steps. It was a little difficult because all this took place in second language, which is more challenging. But also I try to do the same thing with Greeks, in their in their first language, and gosh, sometimes it was so disappointing as well that they couldn't understand. But I'm listening to you. What's wrong with me? Why should I change anything? Well, and I was at a loss for words.
Okay, so it's not only true when there's a second language and culture, because of course there's miscommunication, but even in your own culture and language, there are individuals who just respond by saying, but can't you hear me? Aren't I clear? And they're not understanding at all what you're trying to teach them. They don't think it's their problem.
Exactly. However, as a person, I don't really take no as an answer. So I say, okay, there are some obstacles on my way, but I have to come up with the right tools so as to help people understand that there is a little better way for us to communicate and maybe build up better communication. So I think that the better listener I am, the easier the easier it is for me to show and introduce the first place to my students a little better way to socialize, relate to each other, and share our views without being afraid of listening things that we don't really agree with.
Interesting. So if I heard
was
this
too much.
no, I'm going to try. If I heard this correctly, it's because you don't like taking no for an answer. You actually were able to shift from your very clear way of trying to explain the details to somebody who wasn't hearing them, to you yourself being a better listener of what it is they're not understanding, so that by you being a better listener, you could find a better way, a better language, a better communication style for them to be able to hear you, and thereby have them be able to learn the skills. So Am I correct?
Exactly.
You had to
Yes,
learn to do it better yourself in order to be better heard.
definitely. Yes, exactly. And the last thing I want to add, which is a social comment. I mean, Edwin and Ingrid, a little bit of Nancy, they know that I'm very eager to share my social, political, whatever thoughts. So correct me, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the very last weeks on CNN, I hear a lot of people use the word empathy. I don't know if you watch CNN, but I do because I have to practice language all the time. So I watch for many hours every day. So I heard politicians use the word, and I said, wait a minute. I think this is good news. People start being aware of these things. So that's fantastic. I mean, I was very happy. I don't know if you agree with me. I don't know if the word empathy was so much in fashion the previous years, but I think that people use it more and more lately. That was my
Great.
social political comment.
Great. So as a person who very easily expresses all your opinions, and those who know you know that, you were delighted to discover on CNN, which I also, and I hope most of us see, is in some of these discussions of politics, which I assume you meant globally, not just in the US. It seems like the same thing is happening globally, and that you've heard the word empathy get used in some of these conversations, and therefore felt, wow, there's some good news, there's some hope if these people in political conflict are beginning to, some of them, use the word empathy. So there's hope.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you very much. I feel fully heard.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so since we're trying to include everybody in this, Jessica, I assume you're comfortable being next?
Yeah.
Okay. First, I have to tell you, since I do cultural diversity training, I just love hearing French accent. Okay, I also, since I want to be very personal about my experience, I have to start with, even though I'm becoming better at listening and facilitating, I have to own that not only as a child did I learn that my opinion was heard, that I became all too adept at expressing my opinion, and that became a skill which in all my professional diversity training led me to be a proficient national speaker, not just facilitator, so that even if there were 200, 500, even a couple times 1,000 people in the room, I've learned to be able to speak, believe it or not, for even 60 or 90 minutes. And so that skill, I discovered, became a weakness, of course, when I started getting certified to be a coach. And I will never forget, and then I'll stop this paragraph, but I'll never forget the first day when they picked up how well I speak and express my opinion, that they said, Louis, today you must learn that you are a deaf, dumb stoned surfer dude who knows nothing, and we're going to put tape on your mouth, and you must say nothing and not think about any of your own ideas, but just listen, because all of the answers are within the client. And I literally was the standout in the room of exactly how not to coach.
All right. So first, you express your appreciation for the French accent, and then you shared your kind of like the huge benefits you had growing up that you used in your professional life about expressing yourself, expressing your opinion, and that how it made it really easier for you to, share your opinion and express yourself and really have a great career and I'm guessing still having one. And how shocking it was to realize when you wanted to learn coaching, how it actually turned to be a disadvantage at that point, and how I guess shocking, and wow, I need to learn a lot there.
Yes, exactly. And And as I love saying when I am teaching or facilitating anything about relationship and communication and the energy and spirit of how we're connecting, this is true at all relationships. And I shock people by saying from the boardroom to the bedroom, as well as at the grocery store and with a friend and in all of our relationships, no matter how intimate, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll never forget, one of my first learnings was with my first wife and the mother of my kids, with whom I started this company on diversity training, when she once said to me, "Louis, shut up. I love you. Would you please stop selling me?" And so I got it very personally that, wow, it's so possible to overdo and fill the space when what's needed is the opposite, or when what's already received doesn't need more words. Okay, I'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, you really shared a very profound and personal experience about how it's important that but I'm guessing not only your intention but your presence of listening is important, and to be aware that you need to learn to shut up like your first wife asked you to, and how you are saying that we are basically all people. It doesn't matter if it's vertical or horizontal, bedroom or boardroom, that it's all like about relationship and communication, and listening is part of that communication, and that it is a really important component of having good relationship.
Right. And in the coaching certification process, and then executive coaching and leadership training, I remember feeling resistant when I thought the skills they were teaching were too controlled, like I felt at business school, or like I felt in many places where I'm told this is the way you must behave. Mm-hmm. And so I protested often until I heard them finally say, "We are just teaching you these skills so that we know you can be certified to be able to have these skills as an opportunity, which does not mean you have to use them every minute. We want you to have the skills so that you can choose when to use them and when to use your own intuition and your own instinct." And so I finally was really glad to hear that. However, in the verbal exam of my final exam, when I was listening to these two experts who were testing me, one of them got into such personal aspect of her own life that I could not resist using my own life experience and my own intuition to suggest to her my opinion of what maybe should be what she could do next with this, at which point they failed me because I had crossed the line. And so I had to come back and take the exam again, at which time I couldn't do that. I had to just stay with her experience and not give my advice.
Yeah. But I'm hearing that it's been a big learning journey for you, and with her as well. And that how during your coaching, learning to become a coach, how you were able to notice about yourself the resistance that sounded pretty strong. But don't put me in a box. This is like I have to have some room to be myself as well. So that was a resistance for you, and how you finally heard that, felt ready for the exam, and boom, you kind of got the whole habit back on, and that forced you to do it again. So yeah, I'm hearing how for you it was like, wow, yeah, listening is important, and it's a practice.
Yes, and I know that's enough time for now, so I feel very heard, and I'm still listening and still hearing how to grow further. So
thank you for sharing this. I'll speak to Edwin.
Okay.
Hey. made me laugh about Ingrid talking about taking notes because I took my own notes. But what I wanted to say, listening to people, about the listener experience, there's few things I found challenging. First, it's when I'm listening, I have a performance anxiety issues as a participant, and I noticed also as the facilitator, because if I'm positioning myself as the facilitator, I'm kind of saying I'm an expert. And when I need to model that, I'm like, oh my God, what if I fail and they're going to judge me that, oh my gosh, she's terrible at listening actually for facilitator. And so I'm realizing how it's been a challenge for me to just be present, how it's difficult to just be relaxed and be really present, because the more I'm tense, the less I can be present. I'll stop here for now.
Yeah, so you're noticing that you have performance anxiety when you do listening or facilitation, and it sounds like that's concerning to have that anxiety, because you're noticing that inhibits your sense of presence and sort of being present for others. And you're also kind of feeling a little humorous that when Ingrid mentioned her note taking and how that's a block, you were kind of noticing that you're note taking too. So
yeah, exactly. I like the word inhibit. So well used. So that's the performance anxiety and also the overthinking. It's very challenging for me to shut down the brain as I'm listening, and how slowing down is very important for me, because I can overthink and think very fast, and again, it's inhibiting my listening skills.
Mm-hmm. So you have sort of a self-awareness that you kind of overthink things, and that is also another also inhibits the listening.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the challenges. The few things that helped practice in Empathy Circle, and so I did my coaching training before really knowing about Empathy Circle. So I did, come up in it about, well, I know how to listen. I did some coaching training, and how the practice of it though is definitely increased my skills, and I can see it as how it helped. For example, I cannot even read my own notes anymore. Help to be more aware. I was in a big party before leaving for France for the holidays, and I played a game with myself of, I'm gonna listen drunk people talking and try to reflect back without having I wasn't drunk, but it was interesting to be in a party when usually nobody listen anybody. They're just drunk people all over the place and talking about things you don't understand. But practicing that, just being aware of I'm going to do some reflecting back here. I'm just going to be present with what this person is saying. And it was funny because as their inhibition were a bit down, people were like, oh my God, yes, absolutely. This is exactly what I'm saying. And they got all excited. And it was very interesting to practice in that context. And I was like, wow, it really helps me to be more aware of to even choose, I'm going to be in empathy right now. And so I can completely forget about how wonderful my opinions are.
Mm-hmm. So from having done the Empathy Circle, you've gotten sort of better at the listening. And I guess before that, you were saying that in the coaching, you had learned a bit about it. And you thought, oh, I know all this. But then coming into the Empathy Circle, you got kind of some more practice. And then you've been using, so this listening, you used it in a party. Like people are drinking, they're young, they have their low inhibitions. And you were just really listening to them, kind of making the choice. You had the choice of listening to them, and then they were just enjoying being heard. They were getting all excited about just being heard, and you were making this conscious choice to do the listening.
Yeah, and relating to what Ingrid was saying, it also helped back in France to stay present with my family, which are terrible listeners, and how staying in the empathy made me less angry that they were not listening to me.
Yeah, so you've been experimenting with this in the party as well as in France when you went there with your family who are terrible listeners, and you could bring an empathic listening presence to them and just really notice the dynamics, and sounds like you felt more grounded.
More grounded, and also, the anger that I've been feeling for 36 years about, they don't get me, they don't understand me, I'm always the too sensitive one, and how getting there with thinking empathy is one of my values, and if I want to feel heard, I'll go to my husband. I know I won't go there. I won't go to my family to get the support I need. And having this awareness and knowing trusting the practice also that I've been doing really helped me, to not even stay grounded, but to not expect from them to do the same. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you're noticing that with your family that they're not good listeners, and there's been sort of anger, maybe resentment about that, and that now you've had sort of more sort of awareness of this, and not have expectations. There's not maybe these expectations that they have to listen, that if you want a listener, you can go to your husband or come to the Empathy Circle. And so you just kind of have more space, not getting so upset or angry right away.
I like that. Yeah, that was, I like the reflection. It was good here. And the last thing is, what helped me as well to practice the listening as a facilitator and as a participant. So again, is I'm getting in, because I'm overthinking, I'm thinking fast, I get impatient sometimes, and I cut people off, and I go ahead and say what I want to say, and because I think I'm guessing this is where they're going. And so I noticed by, again, deciding I'm going to be in empathy right now, my patience got way better, and I got way less anxious to say what I wanted to say. And it actually didn't even matter anymore if I was right or wrong, or, oh, you should know that, or you should read this book. I really learned to slow down and learn patience. And I think this has really helped me on that.
So it's been helpful in the sense that you can sort of make a conscious choice about stepping into an empathic listening space. And it's just been very helpful to be able to sort of make that shift into that space.
And learning the patience. This is important. Very impatient, and as a listener, or even as a coach, if I'm being impatient with my client,
yeah. So your mind is racing so fast that when people are speaking to you, you want to kind of interject and not let them really speak fully. And now you're kind of learning more. You can consciously step into this empathic listening space, and then you have more patience with people.
It makes me more calm and more. You used the word space before, and I think same here. I think it gave me more space. I feel more spacious and more calm, and less the need to share my genius with the world.
Yeah, so spacious, calm, and don't have to share your genius with the world.
Yes, exactly. I feel
That's funny. I'll speak to Ingrid then. So I'm really enjoying hearing everyone's comments about being the listener, because I have real curiosity about sort of the space of being the listener. It's just sort of having an awareness of it, a sensitivity, and sort of this awareness that I've been wanting to gain more awareness of it.
So you're enjoying this, hearing everyone talk about the listener, because you have a kind of a special interest in exploring it more. What's the space, or what's created when you're listening?
Yeah, and I sort of feel into it, and I'm wanting to get kind of more nuanced and more aware of just the nature of that, and just hearing everyone's comments is sort of, oh, give me, I've been feeling it sinking a bit deeper into that awareness. So it's been really helpful to have these different perspectives.
Huh. So you're hearing some new things about the listening, and it's giving you a deeper understanding or about some of the nuances related to listening.
Yeah, I've sort of trouble sort of sinking into it, being able to articulate, the listening really well. Like what's going on, I can sense feelings, but I can't translate them into words and kind of be articulate about what's happening. So yeah, it's something I'm wanting to do. So yeah.
So you're wanting to kind of improve, or the way, I'm not sure improve's the right word, but your listening skills in a way. And you've noticed that you, I think you said you can't always pick up on the feelings.
It's more just the space of listening. Somehow I'm really wanting to sort of access an awareness of that space. And I think there's a little bit of me is always can be outside of things versus sort of inside. And there's some kind of a sort of a challenge there for me.
So you sense that there is some type of space that you have to enter when listening. And you've noticed with yourself that you feel you're kind of outside that space, and you're trying to maybe figure out how you can get inside that space.
And one way when I do listen, I try to listen not just for the words that are being said, but sort of like this felt essence underneath. And there's sort of an energy and a felt essence. I'm trying to like tune into that felt essence and be able to reflect that, better.
So you are trying to get better at, you think when you're listening, the other person is having, there's a felt essence, and you're wanting to get better at being able to sense what that felt essence is.
Yeah. And then there's something else that I just saw where, when somebody's in real distress and it's like they just sink into this deep space of distress, and then you're there with them, sort of just being present with them in their deep distress. You're just bringing your deep presence to them, and it's kind of like there's just that sort of the beauty of that deep sort of presence that I think that's part of the listening, is sort of moving, towards that deep sense of just presence, and kind of makes me a little tearful too, to even kind of sort of tune into that.
So it's very this wanting to connect with this deep essence is you feel pretty strongly about it, and you want it kind of in, it's very emotional for you. I mean, it touches you, and you gave as an example of how sometimes when someone is in deep distress, that another person can be fully with them. And you see that as an example of what can happen maybe when you're listening, but the person doesn't have to be in deep distress, but you're still with them fully. And it's something that there's something there that really touches you.
Yeah, and it's that kind of essence versus sort of a more structured kind of essence, and the two of those sort of play out in my brain. And so it's really nice to be able to explore this together with everyone, because it's giving me more insights sort of on the nature of this. So yeah, this is great.
So you're excited about having the opportunity to go a little bit deeper into this, and especially to be able to share how you feel about this. You think there's like a structured form of listening.
In me, yeah.
In you, there's like a structured part, but then there's also this deeper part that you want to access more.
Yeah, I feel heard. Thank you.
So we've all gone around one time, and just kind of checking in is, we'll go ahead and do another round unless, does anyone have any questions or anything they want to bring up from what we all just discussed? Okay.
You want to do another round of the same question?
Well, it can be, there's several questions on the handout. One is, what questions do you have about the listener? If you have any of your own questions. What's been your experience as the listener in an empathy circle? What have you learned about yourself from being a listener in an empathy circle? And then what challenges have you had? And how did you work through those challenges? I know it seemed like this last round was often about challenges, about the challenges that we had. So those are some, and you may just come up with something like what, I guess now's my turn to talk, and I'll go ahead and talk to Nancy, and I'm going to talk about something that's on the handout that we sent out. And it was kind of the blocks, but when I think back to the way I used to be, I still am that way, but I have a lot of remorse and regret for sometimes not being there for, family, friends. I just didn't know any better. I thought I was there, but I really wasn't, able to fully listen and be there with them in the way that I wish I could be there now, knowing this.
So I hear some sadness in your voice and the words that you've said about in the past not really being fully aware of what you can do and be as a listener, and that you feel that you maybe let some of your family or friends down by not providing the listening or the empathy that you know so well now and know how to provide.
Yes. And even this weekend was a prime example of it happening again. And as you know, Nancy was in Boise visiting, and we got together for dinner. And she shared something with me, and it was like a hot button for me, what you shared with me. And so then I didn't empathically listen. And instead I blurted out it was kind of advice or concern. And I realized I did it right afterwards, but I didn't say anything to you then. And then later, I think it was that night or something, I kind of started getting a sense of anxiety about it, because I felt, I knew it wouldn't hurt our relationship, our friendship, but I still felt really bad about saying it. And so then that's when I sent you that email, and then when you replied back to it, that kind of it was, you understood what was going on. I was greatly relieved.
So you related a very personal experience for the group, and in terms of, it kind of reminded you of the past where you would have just, sort of just blurted out how you felt about something, or just not really thought about the listening role and just been a peer listener. And so it sort of threw you back to the old times, this particular experience. And when you said something that you thought about even right afterwards that you wish you hadn't said, or that you would have done differently if you had been sort of more in your experienced empathic listening role, you sort of regretted that and felt bad and started to get some anxiety about it. So you reached out to try and make sure that what you had said wasn't taken wrong, or that you knew, that you wanted to make sure you tried to make that right. And so basically it was just, I think it just maybe, it sounds like it brought home that the importance of thinking about the role of the listener and how it can translate into many situations, from the empathy circle to personal relationships.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that when Jessica talked about to share that she's the genius of the world, I think that's something, as that giving our opinion and giving our advice, it's like, now I'm like her. I love that, that when she talked about, she said it's taught her more patience, and when I'm listening, I can hear that advice or analysis going on in my head, saying, oh, I can't believe they're saying that. I know what they should do, or something, but I don't act on it anymore. I can let it go. But I just think it's that thing about us giving, wanting to give advice and problem solve so much is, and analysis. Those are my big roadblocks that I have to watch for.
So you noticed that you really have two major roadblocks in being an effective listener or an empathic listener. One is that you just have this tendency to do what Jessica mentioned, in terms of knowing everything and knowing how to fix the situation. So you want to give advice, and then and I just lost the second piece that you said was a roadblock.
Problem solve.
Oh, problem solving. So thank you. And and so those two things are major roadblocks or considerations that you have when you are practicing being an empathic listener. So it sounds to me like you're very self-aware in terms of what you need to focus on and how to work on those things. And that when you get caught up in something that doesn't sort of fall in the track that you have set for yourself in terms of being a really good listener, that it causes you some stress and anxiety, and you do reflect back and try to figure out how you're going to fix that.
Yes, I feel fully heard.
Okay, so I'll talk to Jessica, and I think it was something that I'm looking at my notes here, trying to remember. Notes are very important. We have a lot going on here, so.
As long as we're not listening when we're writing them, that's the.
I know, you can't do it all at the same time. I think something that was said was pretty profound to me in terms of the things that inhibit our sense of presence, and it's another way of saying what the roadblocks are. That we have roadblocks to effective listening. But I think it's a really important point, and so I'm going to stop there because I feel like I've kind of lost my train of thought a little bit. But
okay, what I'm hearing, like, you kind of had to take few notes because a lot of good things are happening. Like you find probably the conversation interesting, and you were talking about how. About the thing that inhibits the presence of listening, and using the word roadblocks, about what blocks the listening presence.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I really liked was when you talked about choosing to be in empathy, And it kind of circles back to what I was talking about, proactive versus reactive. And I think I really like that idea. It's almost, sticky note worthy, where you stick something on the fridge or the mirror and say, I choose to be in empathy today or right now or during the next conversation, because it is so easy to fall back into the old patterns. And I think unless we practice and constantly think about how we want our conversations and our relationships to go and to evolve, we can fall back into those patterns. So making a real effort toward choosing to be in empathy, I think, is a really profound statement.
So hearing what I said about empathy as a choice really resonated with you. And like you said, it's circled back what you were saying about reactive versus proactive, and how it's about choosing one of those two in a way, and how by choosing, it's helping to avoid falling back into the old habits and raising the awareness of I love that you said, this kind of thing you put on the fridge as a reminder that it's what I'm trying to thrive towards, and that how the statement of being a choice really sounds really grounding for you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think the final thing I would note in terms of what I've learned about myself as a listener is, I think I prided myself on being a really good listener, and people have told me over the years I was a good listener. But when you put that in relation to empathic listening, where you have to set aside everything, your own experiences, your own emotions, your own biases, everything, just to be present for another person, takes being a good listener to an entirely different level. And I think that is one of the things that I've learned about myself the most in this, is how it just elevates the listening and the job that I need to do to a whole new level.
Yeah, I'm hearing it. One of the biggest learning you're having about yourself, as you were saying, you already had a good foundation. You had feedback as being a good listener, a great one. And so you realize how much the empathic listening gave you more subtleties, more richness into your listening, into your presence, and how it really made your listening skills way better, and how you can really sense that.
Exactly. I feel fully heard.
Thanks, Nancy. I'll speak to Mimi. I like to say Mimi.
Okay.
So I feel I kind of covered pretty much everything I wanted to say about listener before, and the thing I was thinking was the empathy, the listener towards our own, the listener for ourselves, the self-listeners, about the self-empathy and the self-listening, and how I found that, I think, the most challenging. Yeah, I'll stop here and then my thoughts will come.
Okay, so it seems that you like to pronounce my name for some reason, I don't know. And funny. Oh, is that a good thing?
It is.
Okay. Okay, then. So it seems that most of the participants in this discussion have covered. Most of the things that you would like to say have been covered by the people here, but you would like to talk about some that you found as the most important, and this is how we can be self-empathetic listeners. So how we can finally listen to ourselves with empathy.
Yeah, because I do think that I was always so annoyed when people were saying, love yourself first and you love other, and it really bugged me to hear that. But in a way, it's said so much probably because it's true. And I think it's the truth with empathy. I think if we also practice self-empathy and being able to listen our own internal roadblocks to our own empathy, and how we can be present with our own pain and listening and our own joys, how it would improve my listening to others.
Okay. I'm not sure I heard well what you said, that you don't like the fact when people said love yourself. I didn't hear this part.
I said that it always annoyed me to hear, oh, love yourself first, and so you can love others better. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know why it annoyed the shit out of me to hear that kind of stuff.
Okay. So it seems that you didn't really like a very common thing people used to say, and that was you have to love yourself first and all this. You didn't really like it, and you felt that the more self-empathic listener you are, the more you can feel, you can listen to yourself without being critical, criticizing what's your thoughts and what you feel. Then you can be also a better listener towards others. I think this is what you said.
Yes, I think, yeah, it's I think I think it will, I guess what I'm trying to say, it's important, I think, to mention self-empathy and self-listening, because I think it is part of being whole, and I do think we need to be whole to be able to be fully present with someone else, and how being aware of that, to also work on our own capacity to listen ourselves is important and will improve the listening skills for others.
Okay, so what do you say? Just give me a second. Mama, I'm just so sorry about that. So I got fully distracted, gosh.
Is it Mimi? It's Jessica, can you hear her okay?
I'm not hearing very, very well. I need to strain a bit. Yeah.
Maybe
if you move the mic
closer to your mouth.
Closer? I mean, I'm gonna
Yes.
So I'm sorry, I just got distracted. So what you said was that you feel that you can be a better listener. The better listener of yourself you become, the better listener you can be for the other people. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the rest of the stuff because somebody entered the room and just got fully distracted. Would you like to repeat?
I think it's basically the gist. It's just how I think it's important to be aware of how we are listening to our own stuff, our own internal, I said, pain or joys, how it is part of being a good listener for others.
Okay, so as long as we want to be better listeners for others, we have to be in a position to listen our own thoughts and feelings and needs. And you feel that this is the way for us to become better at
It's one of the ways. Yeah.
One of the ways. All right.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you too. Okay, so we had a prime example of how successful you can be distracted when somebody enters the room. Damn. So I'm gonna talk to Ingrid. I think that I'm very skeptical when it comes to being an empathic listener, because I think that now we can just practice it, but we don't really have any differences. What happened when you are with your husband or your wife, and she wants or he wants to do something, and you know that this choice will just put your marriage in danger? or when somebody from your close environment is about to do something that you see that a danger is on the way. How easy it is for us to be empathic listeners. I'm very, very concerned about that. Or what about being at work and you try to have civilized discussion, and the other person just is not willing to do so. I mean, I think that this is empathic listening in a greenhouse. What about the war zone out? I just love empathic listening. I'm just 100% into it, but I'm just concerned about issues like this.
So you're kind of questioning whether or not empathic listening can really work in situations where there's maybe a lot more on the table or more conflict, like a war zone. I mean, you mentioned it's the war zone. So it's like here where we are in our empathy circle, there's really nothing, no big differences of opinion or anything like that. And so it's really much easier to stay in the empathic presence. But when you're in a situation at work or personal relationship, how do you do it?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you were saying?
Exactly. Because even if we have, let's say that we have a disagreement, political disagreement, you think that this is good, while I think no, the other is good. And we fight, or there is an issue between us. We don't live in the same house. We are not part of the same family. So after some time, no matter how much we might argue, we try to implement empathic listening partially successfully or wholly unsuccessfully. What happens when we are on the same roof? What happens then? So once I'm a person who always likes to find solutions. I want to come up with the right method so as to make it possible, even when things get so bad, to be in a position to find a solution. So there is a way, but what's the way and what's the path we should take so as to reach this point?
So you really want to find a way to come to solution, to find solutions when the topic is well, when it's a problem and you have to come with a solution, and you want to know what is the way to get to a solution in a situation like that. And you're just not sure if empathy is the way.
Oh, actually, I think that empathy is the way, but
Okay.
I have to come up with the right way to implement empathic listening successfully in every crucial situation. So there's a way, but what's the way? Because I don't think that we could have such a civilized discussion if we were if all here were siblings or we were partners at the same company. And I mean, my choices would affect your life, Ingrid, and vice versa. And I mean, now, no matter how serious the conflict is, I mean, I just turn off the computer and goodbye. I mean, that's it. I can't affect you, can't affect me. But what if the relationship is different? Can I remain civilized and empathic listener when things go very bad?
Yeah, so it's in situations where there's something at risk. For example, when you're with your siblings or with your family, or there's really an outcome that would be very difficult to live with. How do you use empathic listening in those situations to make it work?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the question you're asking?
Yes, exactly. That's the question. And also, if I'm an empathic listener as a friend, does it offer advice if the other person?
I'm getting you. I can't hear you. I got you froze up a little bit. So
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah. So start. I heard you say about your friend and
yes,
something about offering advice.
Oh, yeah, okay. What I tried to say was that if I'm an empathic listener, is there a point after which I can offer my advice to my friend? Does it mean that if I offer advice, a suggestion, a recommendation to a problem, does it mean that I'm not an empathic listener?
So you have a question about where's the role of advice come in related to empathic listening? Can I give advice if I'm an empathic listener, or is that just kind of off the table?
Right. And I mean, why is that wrong if the other person is okay? For example, what do you think about that? I mean, what should I do? I mean, is it bad if you just offer your, let's say that I have a problem and I mean, you've been there and is it bad? Should I be hesitant all the time? And you just should keep your lips sealed and not say a word because you want to be an empathic listener. So these are questions I have in my mind. And I think that an empathic listener, in my view, should be someone who is an empathic listener 24/7. I mean, we learn how to do this, but I am an empathic listener or I'm not. I can say, okay, now we're going to play roles. I'm the empathic listener and you are the empathic speaker. Okay, let's play the game. I think that I think that I should be like this in all my interactions. And this is something that we have shared in the past as well. I don't know if you can recall, but that was something I've mentioned a few times. So that's it.
So you really want to be the empathic listener all the time, not just in our empathy circles. You think it's something that is worthwhile to do as a person all the time. Was that
yes,
part
definitely.
of it? Okay. And then you're really two questions you still have about empathy. One is the advice, the role of advice with empathy, and if it's totally off limits, or if there are situations when it maybe is appropriate to use advice. And then I thought you mentioned maybe the first topic you brought up too, but I can't remember what that was right now.
Oh, I can't remember either.
Okay.
But I feel fully heard. Thank you very much, Ingrid.
You're welcome. So, Edwin, it's 2:42. I haven't been keeping track. Have you gone a second one?
I haven't. I don't think Lewis has either.
Okay. So, do you, what would be the best way to do that for you two to have enough time, maybe just for the two of you to go back and forth?
Have you gone second time?
I think I did.
Oh,
I think I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do that. Then maybe I can speak to Lewis and we could.
Can I say one thing? Before? Is that I do at some point later on want to address Mimi's thing about advice.
Okay.
So
really wanting to give response to her pain about what do I do about advice.
Yes. Okay. So I can do that maybe at the end or something. So go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Then let's see. What is it? I had some notes here. Okay, so let's see. I had some stuff and I kind of forgot what they were as I was taking notes. Oh, I know. This came up a lot with listening, that, when we listen, when we're empathic, we have to kind of put ourselves aside. And I hear that a lot, the sort of describing what empathic listening is about. But I think that another way of looking at it, this may be more positive, is that when we're empathic listening, we're bringing a deeper part of ourselves forward.
That makes sense. I hear that often people think the skill is supposed to require us leaving ourselves behind while we just listen to mirror what the others said, whereas you feel that in a way it can be the opposite, to actually put our internal self more presently into our listening.
Yeah, because it's kind of like, oh, with empathy, it's this self-sacrifice, right? You're sacrificing something, and I always have a little bit of concern about self-sacrifices. Can lead in negative directions. So the sense of bringing a deeper empathic presence to the front fore is like you're not sacrificing anything, really. You're really just being, going for deeper connection.
Right. That makes sense. I hear that if it were a case of just leaving ourselves behind, that would feel like, or be, a self-sacrifice. Whereas if we're really opening our hearing, our heart's ability to hear and feel more deeply, that we're not sacrificing. We're just the opposite. We're integrating. We're meeting one another.
Yeah, it's a great theory. In reality, though, it's nice to be heard too. It's like, but I guess when it's mutual, when there's kind of a mutuality in it. And I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, I just listen, I listen, I listen. I just kind of unendingly listen." You start getting kind of burned out if it's not sort of this reciprocal energy.
Right. So I hear that if it feels like it's just listening, but there's no reciprocity, that may not feel as good, even though, yes, it feels good to be heard, but it might also not feel as good if that person really is removed from it.
Yeah, that, and there's another quality. There's the listening. I somehow get a feeling that the listening is energetically can be sort of monotone. That there's a listening energy that it's not very rich in terms of its energy for me. And I'm looking for a listening that has sort of more of a multi-dimensional, richer quality that doesn't feel so energetically monotone. Even though it feels warm and present, it just doesn't feel very creative or very rich somehow. So I'm kind of looking for a deeper type of listening that has more richness to it.
So your experience is that sometimes listening can not feel very connected at all. It's just a repetition of words, and you're looking for a way that listening can have more energy that feels empathetic.
It's not quite that. It's like I feel empathic, I feel present, I'm there with others, and there's this feeling, but this feeling itself stays sort of constant. And it's not a variety of feelings within that. It's like I kind of want more different qualities of feelings, that they change more. I don't want to be just in this deep sense of presence. I want maybe that deep sense of presence, but for a richer felt experience to be there. So
even if there is feeling involved and it doesn't feel so disconnected, it feels like it's almost
monotone. Yeah.
And that you would like to feel a more richness in the depth and the 3D perspective of it all, instead of so monotone and flat.
And maybe more of a creativity or something, a creative kind of feeling, more of a creative spark energy within that, within that depth of connection.
So you feel the creative energy not just in the speaker, but in the listener.
Yeah, as listener.
Right.
So, yeah, I feel heard. Thanks.
Okay. So, as is often true, it's so I'm speaking back to you, I gather. We did okay. As is often true, what was just said was very similar to what I wanted, and therefore still want to share, and that is, I have experienced times when the skill of listening is such an unemotional skill that the words can be intellectually absolutely accurate, and yet there's no feeling on the part of the listener. So I feel heard intellectually, but not felt at all.
Mm-hmm. So it kind of what you wanted to share was sort of related to what I was saying, that you can be heard sort of intellectually, but sort of at a deeper emotional level, you don't feel heard.
Yes, and frankly, it's even possible if one does it perfectly. I call it in diversity training, instead of legal compliance, I call it behavioral compliance. In other words, one could listen perfectly and repeat the words perfectly and not only feel any feeling of being heard, but you can even sense that the other person disagrees with what you're saying and doesn't like it. You know, even though they've said the perfect words to mirror it back, you can feel they're not only not with you, they're against you. It's a terrible feeling.
So there's this terrible feeling when you're speaking to someone and they're really not speaking with you, they're speaking against you, and it's just a really horrible feeling to.
Whereas, to be optimistic, the opposite can also happen. And I'm now going to the other extreme. I even had the experience in one of our actual circles with you, wherein somebody, I don't remember who, whether it was me or another, but somebody said what their feelings were, and then the other, instead of repeating all those words back, in the extreme we just said doesn't feel good, they said almost no words back. And it's as if, just to be extreme, it's as if my answer to what you've shared with me is, whew, I get it. Mm-hmm. And that can feel way more heard than if you just repeated all those words.
So you've had an experience where the person didn't even repeat all the words. They just kind of gave sort of a little thing and they got it, and it just like felt like really felt good.
So with every skill we're trying to learn, like I said before in coaching, there needs to be the appropriate balance of which are the right words to return versus no words, so that we've got feeling. There's a doing and a being. There's the understanding and there's the feeling. And sometimes that might require more words and sometimes fewer words. And I even go further and say, without crossing over too far, there's a way in which different words can be shared back, which actually reflected what one has said better than a repeat of the exact words. So I'm open to that, both the giver and the receiver part of me, as long as I'm aware of the impact of it. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, so you're really trying to see about that energy, like how you can really give back the energy versus the words, and kind of having a differentiation between that. And what can you do to really capture, reflect, hear the energy that the person is conveying?
Exactly. So I could go further, and yet since we have 5 minutes left, I'm willing to say that's enough for now, and let's conclude the way Ingrid wants. Thank you.
So what do you think about, we all go around and share a little bit about what today was like for you, or an observation you made, or something like that. For example, for me, one thing is, I'm like, when Lewis mentioned that about the, I noticed that we spoke a lot more about the listening part rather than the reflecting back part. And then when Lewis just now mentioned about reflecting back without intellectually, it's like, that's, anyway, it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that he just came up. And so it showed me today that there's a lot here with the listener role. Oops, I lost you guys.
Oh, I haven't lost you.
Yeah, okay. We still see you.
So who wants to go next? I may not. Oh, there we go. Who would like to share next about what today was like for them?
Well, briefly, I will share one idea just because I just spoke and it's in the same energy, and that is there's a balance needed. There's a pro and a con. And so, as I've shared with Edwin before, even this process of mirroring back has a pro and a con. We get the pro, which is, oh my God, it feels so wonderful to be heard. Let me share now what I feel. I feel safe. And it comes back and we all get, I love it, okay? And nothing being perfect. The downside is that every time we listen to somebody else mirror back what somebody else has said, in addition to the good news about, wow, I feel that and I hear that, there's a little extra time. It takes almost twice as much time to have to go through the process. It's as if, in the extreme, it's as if, yeah, we all heard that. Now, can we move on? We all get that. And I don't know, it's, so sometimes I value the repetition taking almost fewer words and feeling more accurate than if we just repeat all the words and do that perfectly, but it takes twice as long. That's all.
Who wants to go next?
I can go next. I think for me, I found that doing this, where we focus on that one, on a role or a particular topic, really allows me to not only go deeper and understand what other people are thinking and feeling and want to articulate, but it also helps me clarify a lot of what I'm thinking and think about some things I hadn't thought about. So, I kind of highlighted some things for myself today based on what other people said. And I think that that's important information for me as I move forward as a listener.
Okay.
Yeah, to add to Nancy's comments, it was so great to be able to verbalize and I guess feel as well how the practice of the listening has impacted other areas professionally and personally, and formulating that, saying it, and hearing it back was very grounding. And I did more notes on the document, inspired from what I've heard for the feedback of the document. And I think it was also, I was excited to see you again, see you, Ingrid and Edwin again, and to meet new people. And I'm excited for the next one.
Thanks, Mimi.
Okay, I think it's my turn. I think that this is what I had in my mind, what I had asked for us to do some months ago, that we should have sessions with a particular purpose, discuss a thing, and just elaborate on this. So, and also these topics are useful because we need them in order to come up with some, I don't know if it would be a leaflet or something, but it's a list of things that we should have to keep in mind if we want to create more circles of empathy with our people, or we want to practice it more. And I'm just thinking about the questions and the skepticism that is arising throughout the discussion. What about all these issues that have come up? Are we going to discuss them again? I mean, or they are just expressed and just forgotten? I mean, I have this question, but other than this, I'm very delighted about the result, and I think that that was a very useful and satisfying experience tonight. Not today for you, tonight for me.
Yeah, well, I'll share then. I said, it helps to just have this one focus and to really go into it. Helps me to kind of get a more of a perspective to go into it and sort of explore it and get more insight about it. For example, this thing about choosing, saying I choose to be empathic now in our relationships. Like I'd thought of that, I'd sort of been aware of that, but then to hear like Jessica mention it and sort of name it, and it's like, oh, other people are doing this too. It's kind of like, oh, there's this sense of conscious choice and how we kind of shift and the energy shift. So it's really nice. I just find it very, I don't know, not gratifying, but just felt really good to just hear other people's experiences. It may help to, I wonder if we differentiated the listening and the reflecting, to get more nuanced and kind of go into the specifics, and in terms of, like the advice giving, that's a whole nother, it's almost like a whole question of its own too. So we can start getting more nuanced in these different sort of aspects and go more deeply into them. And to also be able, I took a lot of notes, and so somehow to take these notes and make something out of it, something that's sort of reproducible for others, even though this is recorded, so people can learn from that. So yeah.
Do I hear that you just had the good idea? We've done one on speaking, we've done one on listening, and now we should do one on how we as a listener reply.
Mm-hmm. It was kind of planned. Then we brought it together, and it looks like there might be a desire to separate those, huh, Ingrid?
Yeah, because we first, just to keep to minimize the amount of training for people, but then so what I hear you saying is maybe to separate the two, reflecting and listening. And when I look back at the questions I gave you, because the person is called the listener, that just automatically comes in. I think our brains just go to listening and we forget about reflecting back. So one easy change is just to add questions that are more about reflecting back to help get some of those in there too. But we can always separate it out again too, Edwin. I think if we get that feedback again, we probably should.
There's actually a lot of different steps in there, because there's the speaker, what's going on for them, and then there's the side of the listener hearing them, and then there's the listener reflecting back, and then there's the speaker hearing the reflection that's coming back and acknowledging it. So there's really a lot of little steps in the whole process. And almost each of those is sort of an interesting topic to explore.
Should we, so next week, first off, I have a conflict, so I don't know how you guys want to do it. I can't participate next week because I have, at 1 o'clock Pacific time, I have a place I have to be. So I don't know if you want to try to move it up, but I don't know if that works for everyone else, or if we want to do this by email or try to do it here. Edwin, what do you
I can do it earlier if that's like, how much earlier would you need?
I need to be done by 1:15. Wait, I need to be done by 1:15 my time. Is that right? 1:15 my time. That's 12:15 your time. So that'd be 10:15 starting.
10 to 12. Yeah, that would be 10 to 12.
10 to 12.
Specific, I could do that.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, 10 to 12.
What about
rather
me
do that.
and Jessica?
10 to 12 Pacific?
I can't.
Oh,
I have classes scheduled already.
What time's it?
Can't either.
Oh, and Jessica can't either.
how about the same time on Tuesday?
I can.
I'm not sure yet. I don't know about
No.
this on
Okay.
Tuesday.
Yeah, no, I don't think.
So this means that, Ingrid, you can be with us for less than an hour. I'm a little confused with the different time zones there.
I know. I can be.
Can you stay for an hour? Could we have a 1 hour session next Monday? Would it be possible?
So I have to leave. I get mixed up with time zones too. As I say, I have to leave at 1:15 my time, which is 12:15. Yeah, I can't
almost
be
when we
here for an
start, yeah.
hour.
So Ingrid, you're mountain time.
Yep. So what could happen, Edwin, is for maybe the next, well, I'm going to put a proposal out there. Keep it the same time.
Yeah.
And maybe you just do the reflecting back.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the next one, we're going to write one on facilitation. The next, which isn't written yet. So